Okay, so here we have one Ecotech Marine MP40. As you can see here, it's a noisy device, set of tools and a set of new SKF bearings. A little bit difficult to see the codes there, but 607 ZZ and 619/8ZZ. The double Z simply refers to the fact that the bearings are shielded on both sides, not on the single side. Okay, first thing we need to do is to take off the Ecotech Marine sticker. It's very easy to do. Then we need to remove the spacer, which should come off here, the pin spacer, which we can do like this. And the spacer becomes quite useful afterwards, because as we start to remove the screws, we can put the screws into the cover there. This device has had its bearings changed already once, so this is going to be an easy operation to do. You're probably going to find on your device it's going to be a little bit more difficult, but if you follow the same procedure it should be okay. Now we need to remove the cooling cover off the back. You can see I'm just working with a little bit of rubber, it just makes it a bit easier, a bit more protection. 3 more screws which are now inside here on this side, which we need to remove. And then we can take the back off this device as well. And as you'll find as well as you start to do this, as everything is magnetic around here, it's easier to get the screws out of the way, keep a little bit of distance from everything, otherwise it just gets caught up later on. Be careful when removing this back, because there are some spacers and washers in here, and I don't know if you can see that in there, there's a small wide protective cover, and there is also some spacers and washers just inside here as well. On the 5 units that I've done, each one seems to be set up slightly differently, so keep those carefully, try not to mix them up. The next thing you need to do now is to remove the bearings which we have here, but the magnet as well. This is still connected to the actual front part, which is spinning the wet side on the inside. So what we need for that is one large flat-headed screwdriver and a Phillips head screwdriver. Be careful when putting this in, because the magnet wants to take the screwdriver away from us. There's a slot on the back here. Now this one's going to be nice and easy for me to do, I hope, as I've already done it once before. You'll probably find that that's going to be more difficult to do. It requires a little bit more brute force. The screw comes out, that magnetic disc comes off, and then you can see now that we can remove this back. Again, same story, there are spacers in there, there are washers to try and keep them separate. Now we just simply need to push out the entire shaft with magnet on and the 2 bearings, which is like so. Basically now what we need to do is get these 2 bearings off. These bearings have been off before, so they're actually quite easy to get off. What you're going to find though, I don't know if you can see, a little bit difficult on the camera here, the bearing on this side, that's the side with the slot on, is preset about 1 millimeter away from the magnet. The other one on this side is tighter against the body. What you'll effectively need to do is put it down onto the rubber, get a small screwdriver, and just try to lever it off. As you can see, this one's very, very loose. You'll probably find that you have to use a small hammer to get that one off. What I did was made myself a little tool with a slot on the end of it like this, and once you've got some distance on it, then you can actually position that in, and it becomes a little bit easier to get that bearing off. This one is already a little bit tighter, so what I did is I used a bit of 32mm reef pipe, putting this onto here, putting that in, and then just using a center punch to lock it through. Should drop off nice and easily. Then we have it here. Maybe give it a quick clean just to get rid of any garbage on it. Old bearings, don't mix them up. Be careful with this thing because it always wants to roll away. New set of bearings. You can't mix them up because one has an 8mm ID and one has a 7mm ID. Otherwise they're both the same, 19mm OD and 6mm width. So that one has gone on very easily, and this probably the same with this one, I guess. Yeah, that's okay. But what we can do as well is I just used a hose tail that I had cut down, and you can easily just tap those on a little bit just to make sure that they are fully down. Now then, job done. We have to reassemble everything. So basically what we are going to do, take this side off. Just as I noticed before, one of those washers has fallen out, no surprise. Make sure we get it back in position. Then we're going to position this back into the motor housing with the threaded end here. We'll automatically find its central position, carefully putting this together, and that's okay. And then we put the main magnet on the back here, and then the screw. To make your life a little bit easier, I would suggest putting the screw on here first and putting that in. It only needs to be hand tight. So all I'm doing now is I'm just locking the back of it down with my hand, like so. Okay, next part we need to do now is to get this part back on, as we said earlier. Got to align up the screw holes and make sure we keep the spacers in exactly the right position. So this one's a little bit more tricky just to get it on, and the screws are a little bit awkward to find their position. And the other part here is we have to compress the whole unit down a little bit in order to get the screws for them to find some thread to grip onto. So again, the rubber can help a little bit. I can push that down a bit. Once it starts to get some thread, it will naturally pull down. And with all of these screws, nothing needs to be that tight from what I've found with them. There we go. Okay, next thing we need to do now is to put back on the cover. This goes like that. Just be careful to realign the grommet. It slides into position. Check it's spinning freely. You'll notice that there's actually a little, it's about 1.5 mil, maybe 2 mil gap between the magnet here and the housing. Turn it back over. You have the 3 remaining screws which we took out earlier, the little small black grub screws. Easier if you don't tighten them first, just to get the positionings so that you can still maneuver it a little bit. And then once you've got all 3 going in, then just tighten them up, just hand tight. Done. Pin spacer back on, set at the right distance. I hope you didn't forget what size you had it on. Done. Sticker back on. Done. Quick polish. And there we go. One acquired Ecotech Marine MP40.